lot of people that manage food pantries are from an older school type of setting. So stepping out into a dinner church is a little daunting, but they also recognize that this is why our church got started 150 years ago.
Welcome to the Dinner Church podcast. Dinner churches are affordable, they are simple, they are very effective at evangelism, and they are rapidly increasing across the country and across all denominational lines and across all social locations, large city, rural, in between. I am Verlin Fosner. I am the director of the Dinner Church Collective, but I'm also a pastor of a historic church, a 100-year-old church in Seattle, Washington. And 20 years ago, our church went into an unexplainable decline. Much frustration. That soon led to much prayer. And we really felt the Lord direct us to begin to experiment with this ancient form of church, the table church, if you will. At this point, we have 14 dinner churches, and we're opening new ones all the time. In this season of the podcast, I am going to be reuniting with leaders that we've had a chance to train, and I think you're going to find it very inspiring. If you're interested in learning more, please visit dinnerchurch.com. And if you're interested in learning a lot more, once you get to that site, toggle through to the Dinner Church School of Leadership, which is our graduate course. And it is the deepest dive into the history and the theology of the Dinner Church. And now, this week's interview. This is Verlin Fosner with the Dinner Church Collective. I am excited today to have Dean Miller with the BGAV, and he's got a couple of portfolios that we're going to be talking about, so I'm not going to try to adorn him with any kind of a title. Let him describe it as time goes. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And man, so thank you for your time. Why don't we start by you just unpacking for what we call the 2-minute exercise on your family and your context of ministry.
So the short version is, met my wife in college here in Virginia, in Danville, Virginia, and together we went off to seminary in Kentucky, came back to Virginia, have 3 grown children now, as we've both gone through ministry, my wife serving in a variety of roles and I in a variety of roles before coming here to the BGAV, right at 25 years ago. 26 years ago in April. So in 2 months is when I came here. My wife has served several roles in churches and is currently on staff in a church as minister of adults, adult discipleship, and 3 grown children and 1 grandson.
Wow. Do most of your grandchildren live near you?
Yep. My oldest son and his wife and grandson are about 4 miles away from the house. So I get my weekly grandfather fix. So that's a good deal.
Get your papa fix, right?
Yep.
Well,
my middle son's in San Diego. My youngest daughter is still living with us. She has gone off and volunteered as a missionary in Austria recently, is back in Virginia, and is looking for her next adventure that she's going to be a part of. So a lot of good fun stuff.
Well, except for that one across country, you've pretty much got your family near you.
Correct.
Which makes you a more blessed man than me, as mine are scattered everywhere.
Yes, opportunity for travel.
I still remembered my son saying, "Dad, this city isn't big enough for you and me. I'm moving. Seattle is not big enough for you and me, really." Oh man. Well, I really am thankful to have you here, and we haven't had a guest that focuses on one of the paths that you are leading, which has to do with emergency response. And I know that this has been one of your portfolios for quite a while.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about what it is like to lead an emergency response ministry effort for a denominational group, a jurisdictional group.
It is wonderfully terrible Um, the opportunity when disaster strikes, the opportunity to bring hope and healing to individuals is, just an incredible opportunity. And I am permitted in my role to carry that to people on behalf of churches that are part of the BGAV and behalf of others. I'm able to convey the gift of rebuilding their home, and that's paid for by donations from others, or to bring volunteers into a setting and have them kind of live out a part of their discipleship journey in serving others in response to a disaster. So, that side of it is the wonderful side. The terrible side is not just the tragedy that caused us to be there in the first place, but it takes an extreme amount of coordination to pull it off when there are so many others in that space. Some folks in that space play nice in the sandbox, and we get along real good, and things go well. Others, like any playground, you have your bullies who come in and want to do things their way, and then you have people who come in who have no idea how to even play in a sandbox, and you're just jumping through hoops or doing the things that you need to do in order to meet the needs of the people. And so that can be the frustrating part a lot of times. But
the interagency coordination or lack
yes,
thereof,
or lack
and yet
thereof.
keeping everyone focused on those that are
Yes.
bleeding, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
And the thing that makes ours, the way that we do it, I think, a little bit more palatable is we don't just pick up our toys and run into a disaster uninvited. We're very much a team player, and we don't go into a disaster unless we're asked to go into that disaster. And typically that's by emergency management here in the state of Virginia, or by other partners that are already on the field serving. So that means for some responses, particularly outside of Virginia, we just don't respond because there are plenty of other people responding, and we would just get in the way if we went. And that saves us a lot of anguish sometimes. A lot of times disasters can just be big news items, and some people, ambulance chasers is the good old fashioned word that was used, who like to get there and get their pictures made and stay for a couple of days and then leave. And
flash off. Right?
Yeah. So A, we don't go until we're invited, and B, when we go, we tend to stay as long as folks will have us and there's a need. We don't come in and just do one thing and then turn around and go home. We like to build relationships with the communities and be there for the long haul.
So you use the BGAV acronym, the Baptist General Association of Virginia. That's the group that you work for. And then I'm sure that you're doing an awful lot of coordination with your own churches that are in the basic vicinity, and getting them engaged, involved, and even more embedded into the need of the community while they're right.
Absolutely. That's our main thing while we're there. So when we do respond, we're going to respond through that local church that's on site. So when we bring in equipment, we're going to stay at a local church, and we're going to do feeding, and our base of operation is going to be out of that local church. And then when we go into the field and we're working on a person's home, if they say, who are you? We typically don't say we're the Baptist General Association of Virginia from Richmond. We say, we're a group of Baptists working here with First Baptist Church or whatever it is, and point to that
let
church.
Them get the connection, right?
Because
so good.
Eventually we're going to be gone, right? And
right.
That person that had that need at that moment needs to know that there is a presence that remains. So we like to do that, and then we also like to build up the churches that are there. One of the things that doesn't get a lot of attention but is a huge problem in disasters from a church perspective is the burnout that happens among leadership.
Mm-hmm.
In a typical, I haven't seen a report recently, but a report that's several years old indicated that after a major disaster hits a community, 60% of the pastors leave that community.
Really?
And of that
Wow.
60%, about half of them leave the ministry
Oh my
because they just got
goodness.
burned out. And
Just so
it
exhausting, so
is,
difficult.
it is. So
Yeah.
we try to provide care not only to those who have suffered from whatever that disaster was, but for the caregivers.
Right.
And
Give us one of your big win stories.
oh my goodness, there are so many because of the great work that's been done by all of our volunteers. And when you shared with me that question earlier to think about,
Yeah.
of course, a lot of things went through my mind. But let me share this one, and this is a big win for me personally. So one thing that happens on our sites on occasion when we're doing a feeding operation, a lot of times when we do a feeding operation, we're preparing 5 and 10,000 meals in a day, and we usually package them and then send them off site, and they get delivered to churches and hospitals and all sorts of places away from where we're cooking. But on occasion, we set up a feeding operation on site where we're still cooking, and people can drive through, and we'll put food in a clamshell and hand it to them. Well, we were doing this at one particular location in North Carolina, and we had put a big sign out front on a huge piece of plywood that said, lunch from 12 to 1, dinner from 5 to 6, or something like that. And one of my jobs while I was there, as I was kind of heading up that site, I was, hang around the front all the time or be in the office. And multiple times a day, a car would pull up and say, "Hey, are you feeding dinner here? Are you feeding lunch, and what time?" And I just go, there's a sign right there. You drove right past it. It says lunch and it has the times. And, at first you're polite and you say, "Oh yeah, lunch
Yeah.
is, come see us." After about the
Yeah.
15th or 20th time, you're kind of done, Well, I had reached that point and I saw this car pull up. We had finished serving dinner. It was like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And I saw this car, this ubiquitous, faded red, small car. And I could see from it, even as it was coming, blue smoke puffing out the back end, two people in the car, and the whole back of it just loaded with stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, they're going to come and they're going to ask me what time we eat dinner. And I was just, I wasn't going to unload, but I'm sure my response was just going to be very curt, right? So as we're pulling up closer and I'm loading myself up for the answer, the passenger window rolls down and a hand thrusts out towards me with $20 and says, "Here, I don't know who needs this, but make sure somebody gets this."
Oh my goodness.
If God
That is
had a
beautiful.
backhand to slap you, that was it, right? Right? God
The
used the
$20
faded red
backhand,
Toyota
right?
to slap me in the face, to bring me into perspective of
Yeah.
people's really care for one another and
Yeah.
don't make judgment calls and just don't jump
Yeah.
to those kinds of
And it
things.
was a good thing you didn't speak
It
first.
was. It was very good. It was
It
very.
would have been worse.
I don't know what would have happened, but fortunately,
Oh man.
the Lord prevailed. And
Yeah.
again, it humbled me. It recalled me back to not only why I do what I do, but also the good nature of people,
Yeah.
regardless of socioeconomic status or anything like that. There are
Yeah.
good people who want to help people in any way that they
Yeah.
can, and no matter how big the gift is, it's that meaningful moment.
Well, you guys are doing something kind of remarkable. Most denominations have some kind of an emergency response team effort organization, but it's denomination wide. you guys have gotten focused just as the state of Virginia.
Yeah,
And with a relatively small group of churches, I mean, compared to denominations,
right.
you've decided to really step up and be meaningful in this very kind of expensive and very stressful way.
Yeah.
And you've taken on a big load as a smaller group, state-sized group, and that's pretty remarkable.
It is. It is remarkable, and I give hats off to our churches and to our volunteers. Our
Yeah,
focus is here in the Commonwealth, and we've built incredible relationships with appropriate government channels and emergency management and stuff. We do
yeah,
respond outside of the state with churches that are part of the BGAV that are out, and with our
yeah,
partners. We have a very strong
yeah.
national and international network that we respond with. Um,
Hmm.
and it's good to know, again, like I said, we don't we do our response together with others, and to have
Yeah,
those partnerships around is pretty
yeah.
incredible. It is funny when people come to visit us here in the office or talk about disaster response, and I tell them the equipment that we have or the numbers that we have, and it's relatively small compared to national organizations or even other state
Right.
conventions that are much bigger. And they just look at us and go, "You do all that with that?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, we truly punch above our weight class in
Wow.
that
Well,
regard." Yeah,
that is beautiful.
yeah,
Well, I've looked at and taught often about the scriptural purposes of a church, primarily boiling down to worship, fellowship, discipleship, evangelism, and compassion.
yeah,
And most evangelical groups have scored a lot higher on the upper four, not so much the evangelism one, but the upper
yeah.
three. But they haven't done well on the compassion side at all. And for you to be able to step up with what it is that you're doing, giving all of your churches a chance to begin to practice
Yeah.
that scriptural purpose. I mean, without all of those purposes functioning, we're kind of like almost not a church. I mean, we
Right.
become a church when all of that is flowing and all of that is working.
And
So you're really giving a chance for spiritual development, though
oh
you're
yeah,
engaging in need oriented
and
compassion and responses.
and the good thing about that side of it is the BGAV is a fairly diverse within a microcosm of theology and doctrine. Um,
Hmm.
but when we come together to hand somebody a cold cup of water,
Yeah,
to clean out mud from their house, they don't
yeah,
care who's giving them the help. They really don't care what
right,
color collar you wear,
right,
what
yeah,
Bible you read. And our
yeah,
volunteers, they those things get set aside. And sure,
yeah,
they might have some conversation, in the evening when things have calmed down and they can sit down with somebody and have a theological conversation
hmm,
about the resurrection or whatever. But in the
hmm,
moment when we're serving, all that melts away, and we
yeah.
can really focus in on being the hands and feet of Christ.
We remember that center, that significant
Yeah.
center
Yep.
of the body of Christ,
Yep.
being the hands of Christ extended.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dean, I want to pivot the conversation just a little bit here to your Food to Faith initiative.
Yes.
Talk about that a bit.
Well,
Why are you doing it?
there's a lot of the why is simply because of the need, and the how and the when and all that all comes together. It's a fairly new thing for the BGA. The BGAV has for decades received money for hunger and has distributed that money globally and here in Virginia to food pantries
Hmm.
and other ministries that have that ministry to reach out to those who are hungry. And we've, like I said,
Right.
we've distributed millions of dollars over the course of 30 plus years doing that. But more recently,
Mm.
in a combination of our team, the Impact Missions team, that's part of the BGAV, and Fresh Expressions, which is part of the BGAV,
Hmm.
started talking and paying a little bit more attention to what we're doing to, in the same, under the same roof, but in two different silos, realizing that
Hmm.
the Dinner Church initiative and what it attempts to accomplish and what it attempts to help churches do in their ministry and what hunger ministries do for churches can be combined into what we think is a very beautiful opportunity for that host church to meet a human need, and at the same time meet that what we would say is a human need, a spiritual need for humans.
Right.
On the other side, a lot of our food pantries that churches do, and you've seen these and been a part of them, they do good at handing out food to hungry people, and that's necessary and important. But they miss the opportunity to go further than "I'll pray for you" or that we're doing this in God's name. So knowing that church, that some dinner churches anyway, take that opportunity to build relationship around the need, not requiring anything, but knowing that people who come and receive that food that they need have other needs as well. And being able to have conversations about that, and being able to sit with someone and hear their story and know that they're seen and know that they're heard, is the way that we should be doing any of our ministry. So to be able to challenge and to leverage the churches that have some sort of hunger ministry alongside with a training tool of dinner church that says, here's how you can take that ministry to a different level. And have intentional conversation with folks, inviting them into a space that isn't just a cold box of food, but is a box of food surrounded with some conversation and some compassion.
And in time, maybe even hot food.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That changes a lot right there.
It does.
Well, my hat is sure off to any church and church leadership that has put together a food pantry and they're paying attention to that. It's like 40% of the population relying on food banks now.
Yes.
It's so much higher, and that's a government number there, by the way. It's so much higher than most people realize.
It is.
That 40% of the population are going back and forth to these food banks every week.
Yeah.
That's how they're keeping afloat. And so it is such a significant need. The isolation factor and the food impoverishment factor is just way beyond what meets the eye.
And along those same lines, there's also that dignity factor, right? Years ago, people who went to food pantries and those kinds of things were people who were really, really down and out, and that was their only source of food. So there was just kind of this, I don't know, this was something that we put on people as far as trying to section them off and understand who they were. But now the people who need access to food is a much broader range of people. And it's people who never expected that they would be one paycheck away from losing their home if they haven't already, or putting groceries in the shelves. So it's it's a broader swath of people who aren't used to being in that type of space. And to be able to not just give food, but to make sure that they see that they are seen and they are heard, and give them that dignity is really huge.
And these are individuals that most likely, some of them live right on our streets.
Absolutely.
I mean, they have a house, they have cars, they have a job, they look like us. It's just come dinner time, their cupboards are bare. And so there they head off. So that is really a beautiful thing for any church that has grabbed a hold of that. And at the same time, though, that population of people that are relying upon that food bank is actually another congregation in waiting.
Absolutely.
and so that's where the dinner church has stepped in to help these groups that already have some kind of a reach, some kind of a food pantry, food ministry, that kind of thing, to say, wow, if you set up a Jesus table, you're going to actually start doing church for these people while you're giving them food.
Right. Exactly.
And you are going to start to shape them and form them in the full likeness of Christ. That's what a church does. That's what
Right.
makes a church a church. Well, that's what a church does. And so to really grow the imagination I know that's what the Food to Faith initiative is about. Are there any other aspects of the Food to Faith that you guys are looking at?
Well, it's yes, but we're also waiting for those to be discovered as some of our food pantries learn the model and put it into place.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal is to walk alongside them with a little bit of grant money to help them succeed at that, but also as they do it, to be able to have conversation with them to say, what did you learn from this experience? How do you go about having those difficult conversations? Or how do you set the table in such a way that is inviting for everybody to be there? Because, different audiences, you set the table differently, right? And so learning your audience and knowing who you're sharing with is important.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to change some. We're going to learn a lot in this whole process.
How have you witnessed the church at large, and in your case, the church at large in Virginia, in your circle, responding to your Food to Faith conversations?
Well, it's interesting. It's one of those things where there's a lot of interest, but there's also some hesitation because it's, when you think about it, a lot of people that kind of run and manage food pantries are from an older school, a historical church, or traditional type of setting. So stepping out into a dinner church is a little daunting, but they also recognize that really this is why our church got started 150 years ago. This is kind of what brought us together back then.
So true. Yeah.
So for them to reach back into their history, and even to read the histories of their churches, and to think about the times when they were younger, what brought their church together. Of course, a lot of that was around a meal and the conversations that were had around a meal. So then now they're saying, oh, these folks who we have the privilege of serving, I only see them that once a month or every other week when they're able to come in. They're not going to come to my church on Sunday morning. And my church, we can't get out there because they're spread out all over the place. There's no central place. But wait a minute, I am the central place. So what happens?
The food part of it,
right? What happens if on Tuesday night, when we're distributing food, we invite people to come and hang around with us, and let us give you a meal, a hot meal, and share around the table and have some conversation. And then when you leave, you'll also get this box of food to take home to your families and to take care of you for the next couple of weeks. So that realization is coming into people's minds.
Have you noticed that individuals are fine to immediately embrace this as an outreach, but the idea of calling it a church and imagining that you're doing Christ-like formation there, as opposed to the only other way we've all memorized it, which is everyone sitting in a row facing forward and being quiet for an hour on Sundays. Is that, have you noticed that little hitch in some of the questions?
Yeah. It's, and again, I think that's just it's a terminology thing. You get a word and you associate a certain thing with a word, and you can't disassociate that, or you can't expand your understanding of that particular word. Right. But obviously, again, when you look back at the original church, the church of Scripture, it was in a house, and it was probably around a table, and it was probably a couple of families who gathered together for that conversation with that one person that kind of led them. So as people get into it right now, they're looking at it as a ministry or as a mission.
Right.
But I think as that grows on them, they'll say that's who we are. And if that's who we are, then that's church.
Yeah, very much. Well, I know that we've got 4 trainings on the books right now to help really evaluate the deep history as well as the theology of the dinner church, because the dinner church, it is more of a theology than
Right.
a model or a
Sure.
strategy. And
Absolutely.
so it takes a little time to think about that. February 27th, we're in Fredericksburg, which is a Thursday. March 1st, we're in Lynchburg. That's a Saturday. April 5th, Abington, which that is a Saturday. And then April 7th in Wytheville, which is a Monday.
Monday. Yep.
And so all of these are being sponsored by you guys.
Yep.
And reaching out to your churches and beyond. But it's not exclusively for
Oh, no.
Baptists. There are other people that might make it to heaven too that are welcome to come and be a part.
Don't tell the Baptists that. Put them in
Don't
a
tell. Yeah,
separate section.
keep your voice down. We don't want the Baptists to know we made it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we're excited for anybody who understands or even not even understands it, but is curious even about the concept. And we're also planning. We don't have the dates yet, but in the fall we will do this again in other parts of the Commonwealth to help get other churches involved. So we're excited about just the conversations that I think will take place. Part of what makes things successful is even if they're not a successful thing, it's the buzz around it, right? I think we've got both going on. I think Dinner Church has already proven itself to be successful, but there's a buzz that when people start talking about it and sharing about it, then other people get curious about it. So if nothing else, we just want to start a buzz here in the Commonwealth in a fairly strategic and targeted way to our churches.
And there is always the early adopters that'll grab a hold and go, and then suddenly their churches are flourishing. There is something about a dinner church that once you get one really running, it really fires up the Sunday church. They remember what mission feels like.
Yeah.
And they remember how good it is to be back in the populating of heaven business. There's something about that is just it's fiery. It gets the saints back on the Christian adventure.
Yep. I mean, most people who go to church, who sit on the pews and face front and are quiet for that hour or 30 minutes, if they heard anything from the sermon, what they remember is a personal story that was told. So when whoever's bringing that message can bring the personal story of, let me tell you about this food pantry that I was at the other day and how I was able to sit down with Mrs. Jones around a dinner table and hear her story. And this is what she shared. Yeah. When you share that story and somebody in the congregation hears that, they're going to say, I want to be a part of that. I want to go see that. I want to hear that. And when that happens, that's when gospel starts happening, right?
That is so true. Well, Jesus said, "You'll always have the poor among you," and I think sometimes we've interpreted that that's just a statement of fact.
Sure.
When I believe he was actually saying, and look for that, because those are always the front doors of the church right there.
Yeah, right.
When you see where the poor is at. Dick Foth, who is a leader back in, he actually had a ministry with the Senate in D.C., and he said, man, if you've ever lost Jesus, go to the poor. They will lead you back to him. And there is a huge open door back into meaningful society for any church that has kind of become too ingrown or lost its way. And that's why that compassion church purpose part is so profoundly important. It's how we always regain our traction once we lose it. And boy, there's a lot of churches that have really lost their missional traction. And it's leadership from individuals like you that actually opens up the door. This compassion stuff, it's bigger than the fact that it's one of the 5 major scriptural purposes. Right. It actually is kind of like, maybe it ought to almost be the first of the 5.
Well, if we were
fires up the rest.
If we were to track Jesus's hours over the course of 3 years and what did he spend his time doing? We're going to find that compassion is going to pretty much take the cake.
A lot of it is, that is such a great study in and of itself. the
Yeah.
amount of time Jesus spent doing that.
And
And what does that
and
say about our
right.
Christianity?
And did it not inside the temple.
Yeah,
It was done out in
right,
the streets.
right,
And
right, right,
so
right.
that's where we're compelled, that's where we're called to go.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
it's
Dean, I
exciting.
sure thank you for your time. Would you just pray a prayer over all of the leaders that are listening to
Absolutely.
this?
Happy
And
to
I
do that.
think especially just the massive opportunity that compassion gives the church to fire up its jets again.
Yes, absolutely. Let's pray together.
Yeah,
What a wonderful thing you have done with us and through us and for us, oh God, by creating us the way that you have, with the ability to show compassion, with the desire to show compassion, even though that's hard for it to come out sometimes. God, thank you so much for bringing us together to be able to have the tools, have the technology, have the capabilities, all the resources we need to reach those who need to hear about you. God, there are so many ways that Dinner Church Initiative can be employed in churches and in communities. And we're thankful for one of those ways is through our food pantries and through our ministries that reach out to those who are in need of that sustenance. God, I pray for each one of our leaders who's currently in the midst of doing Dinner Church, for those who are curious, for those who are starting. God, there will be obstacles. We know that. When we're about your work, we know that we will run into obstacles. God, I pray for wisdom. I pray for power to be able to work through those obstacles that are created. Sometimes those obstacles are created right in front of us in our own churches. But God, I pray for the power to be able to overcome. I pray for the wisdom to be able to say the right thing. I pray for the proper resources to come through to bring people together so that they can be curious about you. Be curious again about a group of people who dedicate their lives to following you and to believing in you. Because bringing hope and healing is what you did, and it's what you call us to do in your name. So I pray your blessing on all those who are curious and those who are searching you out, those who are in the midst of implementing a way to do that. Help us to be able to come together, to resource each other, to stand together, to show the world that, yes, you indeed do care. And outside of the walls of buildings and outside of an institutional church, that you are alive and well in and through us. I'm thankful for all the leadership that's provided by Verlin and by Fresh Expressions and BGAV and other groups and denominations. Help us to come together, setting aside those things that really don't matter, but that help us to focus on the one thing that does, and that is you. God, I pray this all in your name. Amen.
amen. And thank you, Dean, so much for being
Absolutely.
with us and for your leadership. And if any of you are interested in those Dinner Church encounter dates, they can all be found at the dinnerchurch.com website.
Yep.
Well, we have been visiting with Dean Miller of the BGAV and the leadership that he has given through the door of compassion, and we're blessed because of it. Thanks
Thank you,
for
my
joining
friend.
us
I
today.
enjoyed it as well.
This podcast has been brought to you by Fresh Expressions and the Dinner Church Collective. If you want to learn more about the Dinner Church Collective, please go to dinnerchurch.com. And if you want to learn more about our graduate program, Dinner Church School of Leadership, Fresh Expressions is a worldwide movement that is doing church for people who don't do church in a contextual way that genuinely matters for them. The Dinner Church Collective is one of those streams that is in the middle of this worldwide movement, and it's a great honor to be a part. I am Verlin Fosner, your host. The editor of this podcast is Joel Limbauen, and the producers are Kathleen Blackley and Chris Morton. Senior director is Dr. Chris Backert. Please help us spread the word if you would. Give a review on Apple Music or Spotify, and please share this episode with other friends that might be interested, and blessings upon your work for the gospel.